The Gemara Megillah on Daf Yud Beis, Amud Aleph 12a, brings down that the students of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai asked him, what is it that the Jewish people did in that generation that they were deserving of destruction, that there was this decree against the Jewish people enacted by Haman and Achashverosh? So the Gemara says, Amar Lahem, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said to them, Imru Atem, you guys tell me. So Amru Lo, they said to him, Mipnei Shenenu Mitzudas Shel Oso Rasha. They said, well, it's because the Jewish people benefited, took pleasure in the feast that Rasha, that Achashverosh made. So the Gemara says, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai then said to them, so if so, Im Kain, Shebeshushan Yehargu, Shebecholam Kula Yehargu. So then only the Jews of Shushan, they're the ones who attended the Suda. They're the ones who should have been deserving of destruction, but not all the Jews throughout the empire. So Amrulo, so then the student said to him, Maratas, if you don't like our answers, then you tell us the answer. So Amar Lahem, he said to them, he said because they bowed down to an idol. What is this idol that they bowed down to? So Rashi says, in the days of Nebuchadnezzar. Bimei Nebuchadnezzar, in the days of Nebuchadnezzar. So in the 3rd chapter of Sefer Daniel, it tells us that Nebuchadnezzar erected some kind of idol, and he said that whenever like the trumpets blow or something like that, everybody has to bow. And that's where we have the story of Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. They have different names in Sefer Daniel, but that's where we have the story that they would not bow, and they were thrown into, this is explicit there, they were thrown into the furnace. That was the punishment for anyone who wouldn't bow, and Hashem miraculously saved them. But the implication is they didn't bow, but everybody else bowed, and that's why the Jewish people were deserving of destruction. So Amrulo, so they said to him, so is there favoritism? If they were deserving of it, then why were they killed? Why weren't they killed in the end? Why weren't the Jewish people destroyed? So Amar Lahem, so he said back, Heimlo asu elo lipanim. They only did it outwardly. Rashi says, out of fear. They bowed to this idol in the days of Nebuchadnezzar. Out of fear, they didn't really mean it. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu lo asa imayal lipanim. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu, so God also only did it sort of outwardly, decreed against the Jewish people, but it didn't end up going through. They were saved, they did tshuva, but it didn't actually come through because it was only an outward show, just like what they did wrong was only an outward show. Now this Gemara has many questions that could be posed. Let's just throw out a few. So number one, the conversation is kind of strange. They asked the Rebbe a question. Why were the Jewish people deserving of destruction? So he says, well, what do you say? So, well, we asked you. That's why we came to you to ask this question. Why do you think we have an answer? Why is Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai saying to them, you tell us? Number one. Number two, their answer doesn't seem to make so much sense. Because they said, oh, they were deserving of, we think it's because they ate from the Suda. Well, I mean, it's not good to eat non-kosher food, to eat from the Suda. What did they do wrong? They ate non-kosher food? Okay, it's not good, but to be disturbing of destruction over that seems a little bit, it's a lav. The Torah says you get malchus for it, you get lashes, but to be deserving of destruction seems like a little bit much. Then he challenged them and said that doesn't make sense, because then all the Jewish people don't need to be destroyed, only the people of Shushan who were there. And so then they said, okay, so you give your answer, and he said because they bowed to an idol. So if it's because they bowed to an idol in the days of Nebuchadnezzar, then why are they being punished now? They should have been punished in the days of Nebuchadnezzar. We got the timeline in the last Amud. We know that there's been some time since Nebuchadnezzar was around. So why the delay? Why are they only being punished now? So these are some of the questions that the commentaries deal with, and I want to share a few insights. So the Maharal in his Or Chadash tries to understand this back and forth, first of all, and he says that he asked this question. If the students ask the Rebbe a question, does he say, "You tell me the answer"? They're asking because they don't have an answer. They want him to tell them an answer. So he suggests that they didn't ask what did the Jewish people do wrong. They asked, why were they deserving of destruction? Now that implies that they knew they did something wrong, they just didn't know why it was deserving of destruction. Which is like we pointed out, if it was just benefiting from the Suda, why is that deserving of destruction? So already in the way they asked the question, by asking why were the Jewish people deserving of destruction, they were saying, we know they did something wrong. We're not asking what they did wrong, but rather why were they deserving of destruction. So therefore he responded to them, well, you tell me what you're thinking. Obviously you have something in mind that you understand they did something wrong. What do you think they did wrong? And that you're only bothered, why do they then deserve destruction? So that's why they responded that what they did wrong was they benefited from the Suda, the feast of Achashverosh, and so they're deserving something, but not quite of destruction. So he said to them that according to you, to forget about that they don't deserve such a big punishment. It's also a problem because not everybody deserves anything. Only the people of Shushan. According to you, what you're focusing in on benefiting, on taking pleasure from the feast, it would really anyways only be restricted to a smaller group of people, and therefore that can't be the whole story. So then Rishon Bar Yochai said to them, the problem was that they bowed down to Avodah Zarah, to an idol, in the days of Nebuchadnezzar, and that's why they were deserving of destruction. And the Maharal explains that bowing to an idol contradicts the very essence of the Jewish people. He says the Jewish people, Yisrael, has in their name Yisrael the word Kel, the word God, at the end, and it's imprinted in the name Yisrael, and our connection with HaKadosh Baruch Hu is our very essence, and even when we're scattered amongst the nations, we're still Yisrael. We're still the nation of Israel, as long as we're still connected to Kel, to Hashem Himself. And but when and if Chas v'Shalom, God forbid, the Jewish people serve Avodah Zarah like they did in the days of Nebuchadnezzar, so then they are deserving of destruction. They've ripped out their very essence and no longer are deserving to exist. And that was the answer that Reb Shimon Bar Yochai gave to them. No, they were deserving of destruction because they bowed to this idol. Now, that can't be the end of the story, though, because we still have our question, why was it delayed then until now? So he says that there is a connection between them bowing down to this idol and feasting at the Suda of Achashverosh. And even though it was only the people of Shushan, but in a certain sense, celebrating at the feast of Achashverosh was a continuation of the sin of bowing down to that idol. It was only continued by a few people, but that kind of carried it forward. And that's because, not a few people, but only by the people of Shushan, and that carried the sin of bowing down to the idol forward. And that's because says the Maharal, we know there are 4 Galuses, 4 exiles. There was Babylonia, there was Persia, there was Greece, and then there was Rome. And this is the second one. This is the Galus of Persia. And each of these Galus, each of these kingdoms that came to power is a representative of evil in the world and of Avodah Zarah, of idolatry. And this feast, which was celebrating the kingdom of Persia, the kingdom of Achashverosh, is basically a celebration of Avodah Zarah, of idolatry, and to join in that feast and participate in that feast is a continuation of that idol worship that began in the days of Babylon. Even though it was only the people of Shushan at this point, but this kind of reawakened that earlier sin of bowing to the idol in the days of Nebuchadnezzar. And really, they could have been destroyed in the days of Nebuchadnezzar, but says the Maharal, their destruction, so to speak, was delayed, and that's because one kingdom does one thing at a time, basically. The role of the kingdom of Bavel, of Nebuchadnezzar and Babylonia, was to destroy the Beis HaMikdash. But not to then go on to destroy the Jewish people. That's saved for the next galus, the next exile. That was reserved for the next one, which was the exile of Persia and Madai, and so that was a separate role, would be to at least begin, to try to attempt to bring about the destruction of the Jewish people. And not only that, but also it had to wait until someone like Haman came, someone from Amalek came to a position of power. And it's for that reason that it was delayed, so that would be brought on by someone from Amalek, and meaning it wasn't like the setting wasn't set so much for the destruction of the Jewish people was deserved, but the pieces weren't in place. You didn't yet have someone from Amalek in a position of power. You didn't yet have another kingdom in power. Once those two things came about, and then they ate at the Suda of Achashverosh, which carried forward that original Aveira of all the people bowing to this idol. So then the decree was reawakened, and that's why it came about in those times. That is the approach of the Maharal. Now the Chassam Sofer is also bothered. What was wrong with eating from the feast? Not what was wrong, but why would such a thing be deserving of destruction? So again, the Maharal's approach is that it on its own it isn't really, but it's in a certain sense a continuation of the Avodah Zarah that happened in the days of Nebuchadnezzar, because a celebration of the kingdom of Persia, which is all about Avodah Zarah, is in itself a certain level of Avodah Zarah of idolatry. Chassam Sofer, though, suggests three other possibilities. Number one, he says that, according to the Medrash, the people at the Suda transgressed certain Isurei D'Rabbanan, certain rabbinic prohibitions, such as Stam Yenam, wine that was poured by Gentiles, Bishul Akum, food that was cooked by Gentiles. These are prohibited D'Rabbanan, and rabbinic halachos. The Gemara says, however, al divrei sofrim chayiv misa, that one who transgresses the words of the rabbis is chayiv misa, is deserving of death. Now, that doesn't mean that a human court can carry out a death sentence against them, but there's a special protection that's and level of adherence that's necessary for the laws of the rabbis, for mitzvahs d'Rabbanan, and that keeps everything together, and therefore the Gemara says you're chayiv misa, you're deserving of death if you don't follow the halachos of the rabbis, of the Rabbanan, and that's perhaps why, since they transgressed these d'Rabbanans, it's interesting. On the D'Oraisas and Torah law, that the Torah says malchus for eating non-kosher, but for eating bishul akum, something cooked by a non-Jew, which is d'Rabbanan, that's even worse. That's one approach. Second approach is that the reason why they deserve destruction is not because of what they ate, but just being part of this Suda. What did we learn this Suda was all about? It was because Achashverosh calculated that at this point, the Beis HaMikdash would never be rebuilt. And it was a celebration of that. The Jews are never going back. That's what he was celebrating. And now you had Jews coming and being a part of this celebration. That was what was so terrible about this. That's what the students were saying, that they ate at such a feast, such a Suda, that was deserving, that's why they were deserving of destruction. And lastly, he suggests that the problem was, it's true they only ate, not only, but they ate non-kosher, which generally is not something that's that one would be killed for. It's lav, it's just malchus, just lashes, but to be done in public, in a public way, is a chil Hashem, is desecration of God's name, and it's something that actually somebody should give up their life for, and the punishment of chil Hashem is misa, is death. That's a Gemara in Yuma. So they were deserving, and in the end, though, the challenge that the Gemara makes, Rabbi Shimon says, okay, but that would only account for why the people of Shushan are deserving of this. But what about the people, everybody else? That wouldn't explain that. So Chassam Sofer again lines up three reasons why it was so terrible that they feasted at the feast of Achashverosh. Number one, because they transgressed d'Rabbanans. rabbinic prohibitions. Number 2, because it was a celebration of the destruction of the Beis Hamikdash. And number 3, because these were public transgressions of even if it was something that's normally just allowed, a negative prohibition that would get malchus, like eating non-kosher, but to do it in public is much, much worse than a big chilul Hashem. The Marsha deals with a different question. We said, the Gemara says, that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says that the reason why they were deserving of destruction was not because they ate from the Suda, but rather because hishtachavu latzalim, they bowed to an idol. What idol? So Rashi says the idol in the days of Nebuchadnezzar. The Gemara doesn't say that though, that's what Rashi says, that's how Rashi understands. So the Marsha wonders, why didn't Rashi say, because they bowed to Haman? That would make much more sense in terms of the timing. Right? As we said, why are they, if there was because they bowed to the idol in the days of Achashverosh, of Nebuchadnezzar, why are they being punished now for it? It would make much more sense. They bowed to this idol, meaning Haman. So, right, we know it from the Megillah that everybody had to bow to Haman. Mordechai, lo yichrav lo yishtachaveh. Mordechai wouldn't. It sounds like everybody else would. So his first answer is, well, yes, they had to bow to Haman, but he wasn't an idol. He wasn't an idol. They had to bow because the king said you have to bow to him, but not as an idol, and therefore it wasn't so bad that they bowed to him. That wouldn't be deserving of destruction. That can't be what the Gemara means. However, he says that only makes sense if you say that Haman wasn't an idol. But Rashi and Megillas Esther, and the implication of the Gemara later, is that Haman made himself into an idol. He made himself into an Eloah. So if that's the case, and people bowed to him, then why don't we just say that's what the Gemara meant? They bowed to Haman, who was an idol. So the Marsha says that that because if you would say it refers to them bowing to Haman, then it wouldn't answer the question. Because Haman was only in Shushan. That's where they were bowing to him. So the whole question of Shimon Bar Yochai had was, if you say that it's because of the Suda, it's because they benefited from the feast, then only the people of Shushan should have been punished, and not the people of other places. Well, so rather what is it? Because they bowed to an idol. What was the idol? Haman? Well, Haman was mainly in Shushan. That's where they were bowing to him. So you have the same question. Only the people of Shushan bowed to him. What did the people in the far-flung places do? They didn't do anything wrong. And so the whole question wouldn't be answered. It must be we mean something else. Must be that we mean the idol that was erected by Nebuchadnezzar, and even though that was in a specific place, it sounds like it was for everybody. I don't know if they brought it around or just it was in this valley. It says it was in the pasuk says in the Bikas Dura, the valley of Dura. Maybe it was somewhere that could be seen from far off. But the assumption seems to be that was something that many, many people bowed to, not just a specific group of people, and that would solve this issue. The Sfas Emes says that forget about that. It's not even that only the people of Shushan bowed to Haman. Nobody bowed to Haman, he says. Only the obligation was only within the gates of the palace that you had to bow to Haman, and so people just didn't go there. They just avoid going there. Mordechai didn't avoid going there. Mordechai went and still didn't bow, but the people avoided it, and so they didn't really actually bow to Haman, and that's why it can't be that the issue was that they bowed to Haman, because they didn't. Not even the people of Shushan bowed to Haman, because they avoided going into the gates of the king, within the palace gates, or so they wouldn't have to bow. And however, in the idol that was erected by Nebuchadnezzar, that he says that was everybody was commanded it was to bow to it, and whenever these trumpets would blast, you have to bow. And I think maybe the implication is you have to bow wherever you were, whether you see or not. You would bow to it. So it could be that it had its great reach if they could announce it to far-flung places that now it's time to bow. So then all over there would be people that would bow to this idol from wherever they were. So again, in the second half here, we're asking, why does Rashi say that when it says that they bowed to an idol, it was that they bowed to the idol in the days of Nebuchadnezzar? It seemingly would make more sense they bowed to Haman. Then the timing would make sense. But the problem is, the reason that we don't say that, the reason Rashi doesn't say that, says the Maharsha, is because then we would have the same question. It would only be the people of Shushan bowing, and we would have the same question that only the people of Shushan should be punished. It has to be there was something that was more extensive, more broad. And the Sfasema says that nobody really bowed to Haman. It was only within the palace gates that there was a requirement, and they avoid going there. Maybe once in a while somebody did, but it wasn't a rampant problem, and therefore that can't be what the Gemara means. It must mean that they bowed to the idol of Nebuchadnezzar, and like we said from Maharal, that now the pieces came together that they would be punished for that, especially because they went to the Suda of Achashverosh, which was a continuation of that sin, since Achashverosh's kingdom was a representation of idolatry of servants of Avodah Zarah.